Today, I'm flying a British Airways A350 from Gatwick to Heathrow, which I know already sounds suspicious. Gatwick isn't a real airport after all. It's just Heathrow's weird cousin who lives in Sussex and insists he's into aviation too. The aircraft is empty, which is fine because no one in their right mind books a seat on a flight that lasts roughly as long as a tea break. Plus, this gives the aircraft time to bond with its feelings and reflect on the questionable life choices that led it to Gatwick in the first place. The weather is appalling. Strong crosswinds, towering cumulus, thunderstorms. In other words, Tuesday. Now, some say BA pilots are all called Nigel. This is untrue. They're also sometimes called Jeremy. But they all agree, if you're going to fly an aircraft the size of a block of flats, it's best to do it in a gale for 15 minutes with 0 passengers and just enough weather to challenge your sense of self-worth. So join me as we reposition this flying spreadsheet from the wrong airport to the right one. A route as unnecessary as it is gloriously British. Hello and welcome to a particularly hideous day at London Gatwick. We are going to take this abandoned, forgotten British Airways Airbus A350 through some terrible weather, positioning it back to its home base at London Heathrow. I am going to teach you how to do a proper crosswind takeoff, some of the things we look at, and then hopefully a proper crosswind landing using my wonderful, trusty HOTAS 1 with no pedals, so apologies in advance. Let's get inside so I can actually hear myself think. That's better. Alright, so what have we done so far? We have the aircraft lined up on the threshold of runway 08 right. It's pretty gross outside. Let's have a look at wipers. They'll probably be on fast because it's raining quite heavily. This is the weather radar. Essentially shows you varying degrees of precipitation, red being the highest. Pink is turbulence really rather than weather. What you can do is that these buttons here actually control overall screen brightness. However, the contrast buttons will dim the weather radar returns and show you your actual track. So if I turn it down, there you go. Now we can actually see where we go. Cool. Now, on this departure, we're flying the Gatwick Inverted. Yeah, right. Get out of night mode. You can see Kilo Echo 05 above 2,500 feet. Kilo Echo 09 at 3,000 feet. At 3,000 feet up Kilo Whiskey 19, and then at 4,000 feet. So our final stop altitude is 4,000. However, I am going to set 3,000 here. 2 reasons. One, if they give us a heading, what will happen is that this will change from climb to open climb, and open climb does not respect speed or altitude constraints. And 2, because Heathrow and London Gatwick and most major airports have mode S transponder readers, so they can actually see what we've got up here. So they want us to stop at 3,000 feet, we'll set 3,000 feet, and I will show you after takeoff what that does. We've got wet figures, although you might consider these contaminated. I don't have the ability to calculate contaminated figures in our Takeoff Performance application. The only options I have are wet or dry. I would probably use condition code 2 in these conditions because that's essentially more than 3 millimeters of standing water. The wind is set to... can I look at it here? Where's the wind? Here. 030, but 49 gusting 57. With gusts of nearly 60 knots. That's fun. That's probably outside the crosswind limits. The crosswind limit is 35 knots. Crosswind component. Yeah, we'll leave it, see what happens. It's fun though. Let's see what we need to do. Right, let's talk about takeoff technique. Now, normal takeoff technique is that you push half a side stick, and then you set 25% thrust, then go all the way through to flex MCT. In crosswinds greater than 25 knots or tailwinds, we have to push full side stick. Then we set 25%, allow the engines to stabilize, and then continue to increase the thrust so that we reach climb thrust around 20 knots ground speed, and then continue to increase so that we reach toga, in this case, about 40 knots ground speed. Then we need to remember to read the FMA, look down, by which point it'll be about 80 knots, then we can start releasing this forward side stick pressure. We will confirm passing 100 knots between us, the two crew members, then we'll hit V1 quite quickly. I'll take my hand off the thrust levers, then we'll rotate up to initially 12.5 degrees and then follow the SRS, and hopefully we'll find the right button to get the landing gear up. I will definitely in these conditions be engaging the autopilot quite quickly after departure. Alright, the 350 also has another odd phenomenon. Let me see if I can show you on the screen. Have I got a top camera? Above, yes. There we go. So, with the wind coming from the left-hand side, this engine is getting more air into it than this one, because this one's shielded by the fuselage. Normally, during a crosswind, the wind pushes the rudder, so you need right rudder in a left crosswind. If this engine is generating more thrust because it's getting more air, you may actually need, that will actually push the nose of the aircraft this way, to the right, and need left rudder, only at low speed. So an unusual behavior of the A350 during a crosswind takeoff is actually that where you might think you need right rudder to keep it straight during a crosswind takeoff, initially, at low speed, before you've got airflow over the rudder, you might actually lead left rudder, and then have to eventually swap to right rudder as you gain airspeed. Very unusual behavior. The A380 certainly does not do that. And then we're going to try and pick our way through the weather, go all the way to Heathrow, and attempt a crosswind landing. So, I'm going to arm the auto brake. And I'm going to press the takeoff config push button. It's all green. We're ready to go. TCAS standby, weather radar on, so I need to turn on the... I'll just put these default settings, that turns everything on. And then I'm going to want the traffic pointing upwards, so TCAS above, just so we can see what's there, although I have got the traffic turned off. We don't need to look at that, we do need to look at a chart. That's about it, I think. Now you would normally have the weather at Heathrow in, so I'm just going to really put this in here. It's at 3,000 feet because chances of a missed approach today are quite high. And maybe I should buy some pedals. I think it's 030 at about 40, which is always fun. 25. Now I asked it for 1024, but this is the elevation of Gatwick, so I'm going to leave it at 1013. And it will be a config 3 landing, because that's what you're supposed to do if you suspect wind shear. Okay, I think we're ready. So let's have a go, shall we? Here goes nothing. I'm going to release the park brake. I'm going to put the lights on. Those are on. And so we said we were going to push full side stick. And we want 25% thrust. Right, then we gradually increase to get to about 20 knots at line thrust like that. And then I've got the wrong rudder in at the moment, which is very strange. And then 40 knots through to toga. And then there's our 80 knots, so we can release that. And I'll say Mantoga SRS runway, auto thrust blue. There's V1, I'll take my hand off the thrust levers, and we'll rotate already. What an absolute weapon this thing is. To go wing level, that'd be nice. Okay, gear up. Autopilot 1, nav, and we're gaining an awful lot of performance. Pitch up, aeroplane, please. Nice. Beautiful day. Alt star. Speed alt star. Back to lever climb. The engine's going to come back. They are. Excellent. And that's 1,000 feet to go in this dreadful weather. Now I'm going to bring this back up so I can see. And that looks like a reasonably good turn. 3,000 there. I'm going to turn this silly windscreen wiper off. Okay, cool. That looks pretty scary. Let's turn. Yeah, it's going. It's good. There you go, 50 knots. Fun. Okay, so now we can clean up. So we see the trailing edge flap has cleaned up itself. passing 212 knots. So I know it's safe to go to flap 0. There's our green dot all the way down there. And that's out. So 220 knots is our restriction. 3,000 foot is this restriction. I'm going to turn this to nav so I can see behind me. And we can turn this light off. And disarm the spoilers. Okay, now I think we're just going to clip the edge of this little rain shower. Maybe unpleasant. Change the charts to Heathrow. And we want an approach chart. ILS on runway 09 left. Yeah, I think we are going to clip the edge of this heavy stuff. I was in a thunderstorm recently in these. You okay, buddy? Oh. I don't... If you're not comfortable, speak up. Okay. You just relax. Okay, so as you can see, into the red bit. Heavy rain. Apologies if you can't hear me, but we'll be out of it soon. Let's go further away on the range. That looks quite nice. Gonna find some bluish sky, I think. I'll be interested to know. I haven't experimented with it yet. Let me just bring your attention to this quickly. So if you come in here, you see we've got 220 knots as the speed restriction, and then at this waypoint it's 250. So as soon as we get past here, see this magenta dot? That means there's going to be a change in the speed limit. So it'll go 220, accelerate to 250 knots, but there's still a 3,000 foot altitude restriction at this next waypoint, as shown here. So there's our 250 knots. Now, what would happen if I ask it to go to 4,000 feet and then push it? How do we push it? Is it that one or that one? There you go. Cool. Alt constraint, 3,000 feet. So I've asked it to go to 4,000 feet in a managed climb, but it says no. Your SID says you're supposed to be at 3,000 feet. So what will happen? Passing Kilo Kilo Whiskey 19, this will change from alt constraint to climb, and it'll go to 4,000 feet. And that's as indicated by this blue arrow here. Now to navigate through the weather, that looks like a wonderful track. We've been very, very lucky. Have a look beyond that. How's it going at Heathrow? Oh, wonderful. We're going to get rained upon. I'll probably take us on a heading over here so that we can intercept properly. Oh, it's quite windy. Let's have a look at the BTV and see if I can show you what BTV toys we have. A new one on the 350. So if I go to landing, and this is going to be Heathrow runway 09 left, I can choose the... Can I choose? Again, let me select it. You do... Well, I don't have to put a number in, do I? That's silly. No. There we go. Right. Can I scroll? Can I please scroll? It's not where I want to scroll down to 2. That's how you would do it. You should be able to select 2. That's really disappointing. Okay, let's say it's slippery, and condition code 3 is wet snow. So that's somewhat unrealistic. But you can see there, it's already selected our landing runway, and this arrow is in these conditions, that's where you'll stop. Now, it's not going to delay the braking.
2,500.
So I don't know why they call it BTV. There you go, there's our climb, automatically to 4,000 feet. And we're going to select Alpha 5 as our BTV exit. And all it'll do in BTV Contam, so if I press that now, it's BTV Contam. So it's contaminated runway, but it'll have BTV. Now BTV normally delays the braking to minimize brake temperatures, and that's not what this does. What this does is brakes as hard as it can for the conditions, and then tells you, are you going to stop where you've asked it to stop? There's the sun. There's a big thunderstorm. Let's not go that way, but it's not going to, so I'm going to let it go in that heading. In fact, I'm going to ask ATC, please, for a heading of 300 degrees. And they'll say, yeah, sure. Maybe they won't, but I'm going to pull it anyway. So pull, alt cruise, heading 300, and we'll fly through that gap over there. Now, we're still plus greater than 10, so I don't need the engine anti-ice on. But we're going to start preparing for the approach by putting the LS push buttons on. We'll do the approach checklist. Barra F, I believe it's still going to be 1013 at Heathrow. Minimum, we set at 280 feet. The runway condition, well, we wanted... I wonder if I can do it on here. There you go. Water slush, there we go, cool. Water slush 2 for Alpha 5. So I've basically told it we have standing water and I want to come a lot further right because I didn't take into account the wind. I wanted a track of 300. So let's go heading 315. I'm kind of regretting my choice of wind. Oh well, see how we get on. Okay, so runway condition is now heavy rain. And that will automatically reflect in real time. On here. Go away. Go away. There you go. So now it says, in these conditions, wait. That's where you're going to stop. Beam Alpha 8. So Alpha 5 should be fine, if the conditions are correct. Why are we turning left? Why are we turning left? Jeez. Okay, let's go find our way into Heathrow, because we're being blown all over the sky. So, runway condition we said was 2, and that's still there. Order brake is set to BTV Contam. Approach checklist is complete. Now, we don't want to be doing 250 knots for much longer, so let's pull that. Come back to 230. And then if we are selected speed, when we activate the approach phase, it'll just fly at the selected speed. So this is our managed speed target. Whereas if we'd left it in managed speed now, the managed speed target is green dot, which is fine, but I don't want to fly at green dot. It's too early for that. So we're now alt, approach 1, selected speed, and we've got our approach phase active. The weather between storms is quite nice. Unfortunately, Heathrow is underneath one. Cool. That heading seems to work, and we'll slowly dribble down towards 2,500 feet. So, oh, I'm doing that. I've got this. That's cool. Never used this before. Let's play around with this guy. Let's do a VS minus 500 feet. Look at that. Oh, this is nerd paradise. Show you what I'm doing. Right. Do you reckon I can get away with pointing that there and just leaving that like that? That's cool. Right. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to look up. The lights are on. That's all good. The checklists are done. Now we just need to focus. So, how can I help it navigate? Direct to Centrefix. Course in, I think it's 091 is Heathrow. Where is it? Hold on. Nope, 089. 5 miles away. So I want it in this box. 089. Alright, now that's given me nav blue and an automatic turn, which I don't want it to do, so I'm going to get it to pull my heading again. And then nav has disappeared. 2,500 feet there, 220 knots. Let's start slowing down. And I'll ask you for flaps 1, please. There's flaps 1. That's the nerdiest thing I've ever seen. I love it. Okay, we could probably get away with turning onto north now. That's cool. Apologies if you've got OCD and you can see a speed of 191 and heading 001. I know lots of people that would drive crazy. So now I'm looking here at my ND. That says I'm going to be at 2,500 feet on my blue arrow. That makes sense. In fact, I need to be there at the final approach fix, so I can go on to a heading of 020. 021, will it let me do it? There you go. Let's go VS minus 300 feet, because we're now turning into wind at 50 knots, we're doing a ground speed of 149 knots. So a 3-degree glide would be all of 700 feet per minute. So I'm not going to do a CDA here because I'd have to be at about minus 200 feet a minute, and that just doesn't count, does it? Let's go 180 knots. Cool. We're set up. I should probably look out the window. I don't want to look out the window. That looks very scary. Okay, cool. Good. That's me. That's me seating position. Okay. It's going to be a while on this heading, isn't it? So we're 3.5 miles doing 130 knots ground speed. Oh dear. So that would be about 1.3 miles. I should start my turn in. So I'm just going to keep going in this direction for ages. Apologies in advance if you can't hear me on final, because it looks like we're going to fly through a very heavy rain shower again.
2,500.
Check. That's the rat out alive. Comes up with 2,500. If it comes up early, it just means you've gone over a little hill. So that's actually firing down from the bottom of the aeroplane to show you that you are actually 2,500 feet above the ground, and there it is. It's back again. So we've gone past that hill. So we're 2 miles, 135 knots. We can keep going in this heading for a while. All right, so we'll start our turn about 1.5 on to about, with that wind, 0.58, and then we'll arm the approach, and then we can arm our second order. That's so cool. We'll give it flaps 2, why not? But we're going very, very slowly, aren't we? So I see glide slope blue, lock blue, land 3 dual, autopilot 1 and 2. I'll be amazed if we manage to pull this landing off without rudder pedals. Maybe I'm talking myself into buying rudder pedals. I'm going to have to arm the spoilers at some point, and I don't want to change my view. Have I got one on my little stream deck? Don't know. New toys, man, new toys. No. On the ecam page? No. General? I don't know. I know I've seen it on there somewhere. Okay, that's lock star. We're turning in, and some lightning. That's also fun. 9 miles, 180 knots. That's fine with this wind. Let's bring that range down. That's very scary. Okay, so we're 180, we'll come back towards 160. Ah. Is that a 50 knot crosswind? Okay, for clarification, the crosswind limit of the A350 is 40 knots. But it's not real, so we'll continue for the sake of demonstration purposes, and you can all laugh at me. I may even get to show you a go-around. So let's talk about putting the landing gear down. That's a good idea, isn't it? How to do a crosswind landing then. So we're going to look forward and flare at exactly the same point. And the best way is to flare as late as possible, because you just want the aircraft on the ground. This is probably not going to be pretty. Yes. Let's go flaps 3. And we need to go around altitude of 3,000 feet. And then you're going to keep the nose into wind and decrab using the rudder as late as you possibly can, but generally around 20 feet should work. And then as it starts drifting downwind, the only option you've got left is to use bank. But unfortunately 5 degrees of bank and more is when you get to the area where you may well be banging engine pods and wingtips. So it's a delicate balancing act. I need to arm these spoilers, don't I? Do the landing checklist. Didn't find my arm the spoilers button. Okay, through the heavy rain. Landing checklist is complete. Go around altitude is there. Do I manage the speed? Yes, I can. And we are facing sideways because I think I might have accidentally put in a 50-knot crosswind. Hopefully, hopefully we'll be able to see the runway. If not, let's talk about how to do a go-around. I would go all the way through to Toga, because it'd be a wind shear go-around. I don't want to be doing soft go-arounds. Oh, there's a runway. It's exciting. Look at that. See the speed? I managed it, and it's gone all the way up to 170 knots. That's something called ground speed mini. Essentially, if we were back at 120 knots, where we should be, ground speed would be less than 100 knots, which you really don't want to be doing, especially in wind shear. Alright, I can turn me thingies down. Thingies, of course, are wipers. I'm sure the cabin is actually ready. Look at that! London Heathrow. I think it's stopped raining now anyway. This is not going to go well, is it, chaps? Heathrow looks cool, though. Well done, any builds. Right.
500.
Brace for impact. Approach 1. Why have we immediately pitched up? I don't want to do that.
400.
I'm not going to chase the glide slope this low down. That's good there anyway, so let's come back to our pitch attitude of about 3.5. 100 above's checked. Tiny corrections.
200. Minimum.
Continue. Incredibly.
100.
Alright, so now I am looking at the end of the runway.
50. 40. 30. 20. 10. 5.
About. Oh, didn't quite get that drift all the way off to them. There you go. Alright, sound spoilers. Reverse green. BTV Contam. And we're decelerating. That's 70 knots. Now, the BTV in contaminated mode should do better than that. It should have absolutely stood on the brakes. Now this looks like it's working like normal BTV. Why does this, when you cancel the reverse, it kind of sounds like a... How do you turn the BTV off? Alright, let's vacate here and go to the stand. Not sure what's going on with the ANF. That was lovely, look at that weather. Okay, bud. Oh. GPU is struggling. Or GPU. Okay. So once you've vacated the runway, you change your pants. Work out where you're going. Now I'm kind of just turning right because it's a British Airways aircraft. I'm heading towards Terminal 5. Turning left. Okay. Let's look up. Lights can go off. You can go off. And then there's a signal to my CM2 that I want to do something. I'm going to disarm the spoilers. In response to which... What's going on with this? It's like it's selected. There we go. Okay. Alright. He will clean up flaps for me. Probably don't need to be doing all this speed if we got a bit of power on. Don't need. So So it's always a maximum of 30 knots, generally less in low visibility operations or particularly slippery conditions. Cool. Where are we going then? We need a ground chart for Heathrow, which we obviously would have done beforehand. AGC. So we're heading along Alpha. Probably going to go down Charlie and find a stand somewhere on 2B. 5B. Accelerating again. Now, it's called the ANF is zooming itself in. We want it to come in a bit more than that. I feel like my rudder's not in trim. Maybe I'm... So the 350 has a couple of things that make this feel a bit odd, because I'm turning left and turning left and turning left. Now you could say that's because of the strong wind from the right, which is pushing the rudder, which would turn the nose into wind. That would make sense. However, the 350 on the ground has something called the heading control function, which I believe was included in one of the updates that Anybuild's put out recently, that they have implemented the heading control function. So generally, you're supposed to just be able to let go and it will taxi in a straight line. Doesn't appear to be the case at the moment. So that's Delta, which is this one. We're going to go down Charlie, so second left. Ideally, these guys would all be British Airways aeroplanes. Look at that windsock. What a knob. Silly. Alright, so nobody else is stupid enough to land in these conditions. Yeah, I think maybe I'll go and buy a... If you've got any recommendations on what kind of kit would allow me to actually fly this aeroplane better, I would greatly appreciate your advice. Because while I can fly the real thing, this whole flight sim malarkey is very much new to me. I'm learning a lot every time. Hopefully the videos are getting better the more and more I put them out. But I'm blown away every time. You know, you guys have been so helpful in giving me advice. I've managed to turn off all the blue stuff for this one, which is good for the realism. Because it sounds like realism is what you guys are looking for, which is cool, because I'm very, very lucky and very, very privileged to be able to share my experiences with you guys. That looks like a stand there. Should we yoink that one? We're going to need the APU if we're going to do that. So the APU takes, I think I said last time, about 1 minute and 15 seconds to start. Yeah, let's park it on there. Parked here too many times in a previous life. There was a car on it. I can't park on that one. What are you doing? Can't park there. Hello. Can't park there, sir. Has this one not got a car on it? Let's take that one. 555. Oh, slow down then, Jim. Alright. We're going to turn left onto stand 555. And... Boink. That weather is disgusting. Once you are aligned, you would hopefully get some guidance, but I don't think it's going to come on for us. You'd obviously want to turn off the nose wheel lights, because you don't want to blind the people who are usually there waiting for you. I'll have a look in a second. My top-down camera. See how... Oh, if only we had these nice top-down cameras to help us park the real aeroplane. We do have a camera though. helps. Back to our normal thing, set park brake on. Now, as we said before, we would have turned off these lights, which we've done. The bleed goes on. And with the bleed on, there's always one last check that you've done these. Because if you haven't done that, and then you do this, it gets very dark very quickly. All right. Let's ask the ground crew to disarm the doors, which they have. We'll wait for these. Generally below 10% N1 is safe. Turn the beacon off. CM2 or pilot monitoring indeed would switch off the fuel pumps. Once you've confirmed that they have indeed disarmed all of the slides, turn off the seatbelt sign. You'd come in here and you'd go to position, monitor. Make sure these haven't drifted too much because that means your IRSs have failed. Transponder can now go off. And you do the parking checklist. Parking checklist says park brake and shocks. Well, park brake's on. Nobody's spoken to me yet. The wing lights, they're all off. And parking checklist is complete. I'm going to arrange a therapist for my colleague. And there we are, safely on the ground at Heathrow, the spiritual home of British Airways, overpriced baguettes, and pilots named Nigel. The weather did its best to yeet us into the grass, but we remained composed, professional, and only mildly traumatized. Now, in the spirit of transparency, and because the replay looked like something out of a training manual entitled How Not To, I went back and had another go at the landing. It's what we in the industry call the social media
100.
version.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5.
The aircraft is now back where it belongs. Gatwick remains confused and slightly offended. Thanks for joining me on this gloriously unnecessary adventure across Britain's dampest airspace. If you enjoyed watching an empty aircraft battle the elements for fun and zero profit, do consider liking, subscribing, or simply shouting "Nigel" at the screen.